Welcome, everyone, to another BG Bio evening. I am ever so glad that you've joined us tonight. I'm Caleb, or Duban, as I'm known in the Discord server, and I'll be your host this evening. Tonight, we're going to be chatting with another relatively new member in our Fresh Faces series. If you have any questions that you want to add to the interview at any point, add them in the chat. I do read most of the chat. Sometimes it moves too quickly for me, but I really try, and I will add those in as appropriate. So without further ado, hoopla nonsense from me, let's go ahead and dig right in. So these are going to be the most difficult questions I ask this evening, so prepare yourselves. What is your name and what are your pronouns?
My name's Johnny, with an I, and my pronouns are he, him.
Perfect. And what game are you playing on stream this evening?
Stardew Valley.
Perfect. I feel like I say this every time, and it's not scripted, except in my head, I suppose. But I have not seen much Stardew Valley, so I'm excited. Everyone ends up playing. Well, almost everyone plays something I haven't seen. Maybe that means my gaming library is not well rounded, but we'll live with that. All right. So now that we have the difficult stuff out of the way, let's move on to something a bit lighter. We're going to break some ice with some rapid fire questions. I've got a few sets of them. Answer as quickly and as controversially as you can. I'll stop in between sets to let you breathe. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'll do my best to answer controversially.
Perfect. All right. What's your favorite Starbucks drink?
Oh, God damn it. Okay, so it really depends on my mood. You're like my Starbucks barista drink, which is the super complicated drink that Starbucks baristas get because they have plenty of time behind the bar, is like a chai half, soy half and half, no water. And then if my usual drink is more of an Americano with just black, one sugar in the raw.
Should have known better than to open with a coffee question to a barista. What's the best type of donut?
Bavarian cream, not Boston cream. Not a big chocolate person.
Is it ever okay to have ice cream in winter?
I want to say no, but like I've done it. So like, wait, just don't tell people.
Good answer. Which goes in first, the milk or the cereal?
A cereal, always. Like, I will fight you.
That's reasonable. Pie or cake?
Cake, always.
Wrong choice. What's the best kind of cake?
Buttercream icing.
Okay.
Birthday cake. I'm like really finicky about icing. I despise the whipped icing. I think it's gross.
Yeah. Fair enough. All right, that's the end of our first set. Even though you got the pie or cake question wrong, we'll somehow forgive you and move on anyway. Buttercream icing is good, so I'll at least give you points for that.
Pie is just dessert that failed.
You're really trying hard to anger me. All right, take a deep breath. We'll launch into our next set. What's your favorite season?
I have to say fall. I do like summer. Basically, anytime the weather is above 70 degrees.
If you could go anywhere in the world for a visit tomorrow, barring COVID, where would it be?
So, this is a complicated question. Kind of feel obligated to say Puerto Rico to visit my family because if I didn't, I would feel guilty about it. But also, pretty much anywhere. Like, I would love to travel. Like, I've never left the country, so I'd love to go anywhere.
Fair enough. What's the best dance track?
What is the best dance track? Um, you know, I'm gonna have to say, like, give me some salsa. Not any specific, like, not any song in specific, but like just salsa in general. Give me some salsa.
Gotcha. Toilet paper, over or under?
Over.
Good choice. Oxford comma, yay or nay?
Um, so here's where I'm gonna be controversial. Generally, I'm yay, but I feel like everyone is yay, so I'm gonna say nay.
Interesting choice. I'll accept that answer because I'm on the nay side. What's your favorite font?
Comic Sans.
You really went straight in for the controversial, didn't you? I'm gonna cover up chat. I can't. Kara's going crazy. um, so you've lost the audience here. Dana says you monster. Someone was excited about Comic Sans. Eclectic Grape is in your corner. All right. So launching into the last set, now that we've offended everyone in the audience and the interviewer, I hilariously, both Dana and Chris commended me for being willing to continue the interview after you said cake. Which it's always a bit of a risk. But we'll launch into our last set. We'll see if we can get even a little bit more controversial with this one. All right. In plush form, what's the cutest animal?
I mean, all of them. Like stuffed animals are just adorable regardless. Like foxes, giraffes, like there is no animal that isn't cuter as a plush.
Got it. Are video games better in 2D or 3D?
I think it depends. Like I think there are some games like Pokemon better 2D. Like sorry, like going 3D was a mistake for Pokemon. But like Zelda better 3D. So it really depends on the series.
Gotcha. Do you play support, tank, or DPS in multiplayer games?
I play support because they're easy, like it's easier to understand. Like I generally don't play multiplayer games because I am terrible at them. But when I do, I play support.
Gotcha. Who's your all-time favorite animated character?
Going for the hard ones. I'm gonna have to say. So for me, favorites are subject to change on a whim. For now, I'm gonna say that it is either Amethyst from Steven Universe.
Gotcha. Good choice. What's your favorite D&D class?
Sorcerer, or as I call them, wizards with ADD.
In a tabletop role-playing game, is it better to be the DM or a player?
That's a hard question for me to answer because most of my experience has been as a DM. Because I am definitely one of those people who was always looking for somebody to play D&D with and couldn't find one, so I just ended up becoming a DM.
Fair enough. All right. Well, that ends our controversial segment. Perhaps not our only one, but the pre-planned controversial segment. So I hope everyone enjoyed that. Johnny and I's friendship is a little frailer than it was at the beginning of this interview. So I hope it was at least entertaining. All right. So let's talk. What was that?
I got to say that my favorite font was Comic Sans. So I feel like
I think that's the equivalent of lighting something on fire. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about a bit of where you came from and what led you here. So we can start at the beginning, as I am prone to do these things. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
So I was born in Arecibo, in Puerto Rico, which is like a city on the north coast, about an hour west of San Juan. Um, so I lived in Puerto Rico until I was 6. I moved up to Massachusetts after my younger sister was born. My younger sister is disabled, so my family moved up here to Massachusetts to get treatment for her. So then I grew up in Marlborough, which is here in Massachusetts, about an hour from the capital, which would be Boston. Um, yeah.
Gotcha. So who all was in your household growing up? So you mentioned a younger sister. Who else?
So it was myself, my younger sister, and my parents. Um, we lived. We actually. I grew up in like government housing. Uh, I like to joke that I grew up in like the bad part of Marlborough, which is not inaccurate, but it's kind of like it's Marlborough. How bad can it be?
Sure. Fair enough. What's your family like? Can you describe them?
Um, my parents, they kind of don't get along. So that part of life was kind of rough. But my dad is. I'm very similar to both my parents. I like to say that I'm like the worst part of both my parents combined. Um, because I am very like hard headed and like willful, like my mom. But I'm also like a giant goofball like my dad. My dad is amazing at puns. Oh no, I died. My dad is like amazing at puns, and I am terrible at puns, and I am sad about. I will forever be sad about that.
Fair enough. Um, so what were you like as a kid? What sort of things did you like to do? Were you more of a good kid, a troublemaker?
Um, I was always I wouldn't say that I was like rebellious, but I've always had like a very strong sense of self, and like I know what I think and I know what I want, and I don't like, and so I would always be like arguing with my mom because she'd be like, "Oh, like don't do that," and I'm like, "I'm gonna do it anyways." Um, I've actually chilled out a lot as I've gotten older, which might be hard for some people to believe, but like I was much more, I'll say volatile when I was younger. Yeah, I've chilled out a lot as I've gotten older.
Gotcha. Fair enough. So where did you go to elementary, middle, and high school?
So I went to school in Marlborough. Yeah, I went to I went through the Marlborough public school system.
Gotcha. Did you enjoy schooling, or was it something that was more of a chore for you? Did you enjoy any part of it, or all of it, or?
I've always, yeah, I've always been like I was kind of like one of those in between kids. Like I wasn't cool, but I wasn't like a loser either. It's actually kind of funny. I remember, so Marlboro High was like super cliquey. When I think it was my senior year, I was in like a cappella choir, and we went to like this program, like this like weekend, one day retreat, whatever, where they brought in kids from like schools all over like the area, and we would like spend the day learning a song, and then we would perform a concert at the end of the day. And I had a really hard time like making friends with the people in my school in my chorus. And then I went to this activity, and like I had the easiest time making friends with people there. And meanwhile, the people from my school were just like sitting in a corner, just kind of being like a little clique. And so that's kind of always a memory that'll stick with me. um, but I had a good time. What was the question? I'm sorry. I feel like I started. I don't know.
Just about how you felt about your schooling, whether you enjoyed it or whether it was more of a burden.
I'm like this. I was always the smart slacker. Partially because I had undiagnosed ADD, and so I didn't. It wasn't bad for me. I've always enjoyed learning and going to school and stuff like that. I just never did my homework and never studied, and so my grades was like my tests were like 100, and then my homework was like 0, and so it eats. Or like my homework was like 50, so it evened out to like a 75.
Gotcha. Fair enough. So what sorts of things did you do in high school? Did you participate in extracurriculars or?
Yeah, I was like a big chorus kid.
Sure.
I was in chorus every single year. When I was so Marlboro High used to have a show choir, which I was part of for 1 year, because then the teacher that ran it retired, so they got rid of it, and it was really sad for me. But then I just shifted to a cappella choir.
Gotcha. Fair enough. That's unfortunate. How did your show choir do the year that you got to be in it?
I don't think we did that great. We went to like this competition, and so I used to be like so freaking tiny, like I was like skin and bones, and so we went to like this competition, and my like in the middle of our show, like my shirt got untucked, and so I got yelled at for that. But I had a good time. Like it was a good time. I wish I could have done it all through high school.
Gotcha. Fair enough. So what came after high school for you? What did you do next?
So I went to Mass Bay Community College. Got an associate's in communications. Um, and then after that, I moved back to Puerto Rico to go to college and get my bachelor's. So I ended up living in Puerto Rico for 5 years, I think it was, before I moved back. I went to this university called Sagrado. Um, it was really funny because so I had come out to my parents by the time I went to school in Puerto Rico, and my parents were like, when we were moving, they were like, "Oh, like you can't tell people you're gay," because like I was also going to like a Catholic university, And so they were like really freaking out. And I was like, look, it's not like I'm gonna go walking down the street like with a giant banner saying I'm gay, right? But like I'm not gonna go back in the closet either. And then when we went to a school tour, um, like we were being given a tour, and like when we went to go into the boys' dorm, there was like a guy that was like sitting on a bench like in front of the dorms, and then another guy comes up and they're just like, hey girl, how are you? Yeah. And it was like, turns out like Sagrado had like a reputation for being like the school where like all the gay people went. And so it ended up being like not even a problem. I used to jokingly refer to the dorms as like the semi boys dorms. I mean, it's funnier in Spanish.
Fair enough. So you didn't know that until you went. That wasn't part of your decision
No,
process.
no, it was not. I mean, I am so happy. Like my time in Puerto Rico was like such a period of personal growth for me. Part of it was just like being in a community with other gay Puerto Ricans. And that was like completely life changing for me. Um, but I mean, there was like also like Puerto Rico is like in really bad shape. And like living in Puerto Rico is kind of like what made me go from like a liberal to like a full blown like pseudo anarchist, pseudo communist, like whatever the fuck it is that I am.
Fair enough. That seems reasonable. So what are you up to these days? You're back in Massachusetts now. What happened after college?
So the economy in Puerto Rico was like terrible. Like it was just really, really bad. I couldn't get a job. And so I ended up moving back to Massachusetts. I moved back with the explicit purpose of going back to school and getting a degree in sociology, which is currently what I'm doing. I just finished.
Out. All right. We're back on. Sorry about that. We've returned. Hello, everyone. So you came back to Massachusetts to go to school, get a degree in sociology. I think that's where you were when we got cut off there.
Yeah. So when I came back, I wanted to go straight into grad school, but there were like certain classes I needed that I didn't have. So I ended up having to get another bachelor's in sociology, though thankfully that process was like 2 years. And then it was like one full year and then one semester that was like two classes. So I went through the program really quickly.
Gotcha.
But then I just got my master's, and then I just entered into a PhD program.
Gotcha. Can you tell me a bit about your research?
Yeah. So being in Puerto Rico, like growing up, I was like one of those like gay guys who was like, oh, like I'm not like other gay guys. And a big part of it was just that I've always really strongly identified as being Puerto Rican. And like I didn't I just didn't understand how being gay was like important or relevant to me. And it wasn't until I moved to Puerto Rico and I was in the dorms in Sagrado with like 80 bajillion other gay Puerto Rican guys that I kind of like started to develop like a strong queer identity. And so that has inspired my research. So I study identity development among queer men of color and the importance of like representative social networks. Um, basically, what I find is that there's often a tension between a queer identity and like a racial identity or an ethnic identity, where like oftentimes queer people of color feel like they have to choose one. And um, it's if if people when people have access to these networks of other queer people of color, they're able to kind of like unite these identities and like it's no longer like am I gay or am I like Puerto Rican? Now it's like I am a gay Puerto Rican. Like I am both. It's not an either or. But like that really only happened. Like it's harder to develop that kind of like complete identity if you don't have access to like these ethnically relevant queer social networks.
Gotcha.
I do qualitative interviews, which if anybody here, if like any of the queer men of color here would like to participate in an interview, let me know.
Perfect. So you've got your master's, you're finishing up your PhD, or going for your PhD now.
Mhm.
What's your dream job after you finish the PhD? What do you want to do?
Um, I want to go into academia. Um, I'm kind of struggling a little bit deciding what it is that I want because I want to prioritize teaching. Really, I taught a class and I enjoyed so much. Um, want to write off research. Like I do want to research. I do enjoy research. So it's I've been debating whether I want to teach like at a community college. I know that I definitely want to teach at like a minority majority campus, um, but I'm kind of debating whether I want to go into community college or like regular colleges.
Gotcha. Fair enough. So I don't know much about sociology academia, so maybe this is obvious, but are there good jobs that include good teaching components and research components, or are people often like called upon to pick which one they're more interested in?
So the thing is, it's like because you have to deal with tenure, which is like, and like there are like no jobs, because one of the problems that are coming up is that like as tenured professors retire, a lot of those positions are being replaced with adjuncts, which are basically professors that are hired to teach a class, as opposed to like a tenure track professor who like is basically like an employee for the school and they do research from this for the school. Um, so the field is like super competitive, and I think that's just academia in general. Um, so I mean, if you can get like a tenure track position, um, I mean, it's like I think like entry level is like 60,000 a year, which isn't amazing, but like also I'm like poor. So like 60, like I don't think I've ever made like more than 40,000 a year. So like for me that's still like a lot of money.
Sure. All right. So I kind of want to pivot into talking a little bit about your identity, but I think it ties in really well both with what you've just been discussing and also some things you mentioned earlier. So some of this is going to be stuff that we've talked a little bit about, but maybe a more personal perspective on these things. What are some of the pieces of your identity that are the most important to you?
Um, so I really love this question because one, right, like like I research identity, but two, like as a qualitative researcher who's kind of uh, steeped in intersectional feminist like theory, there's a giant component of like positionality, which is you have to basically understand like what your identity is, because what your identity is going to impact um, like when you interview people, like people are going to respond differently to you because of who you are, right? Like if you are talking about race and you're a white scholar, you know, you're not going to get the same responses that if you are a person of color, right? And so, I mean, my most prominent identities, right, are like queer, like gay slash queer, Puerto Rican, uh, definitely poor. I like to call myself poor over like working class. Kind of like my own little politics of just like not like not using euphemisms. Like I want to identify as poor because like I'm poor and there's nothing to be ashamed of, right? Like being low income is not a personal failing.
Sure.
Um, I definitely see myself as a Marxist scholar. Maybe not like Marxist as a communist, but like definitely a Marxist scholar because it's about like materialism, right? Like you look at what the like it's not about what you think things should be. It's like what is the material reality of things, right? Like how does like having X amount of income impact people's chances? How does being queer like materially impact people's lives? So like a scholar, I think I'll keep it at those because I could probably keep going.
Fair enough. So I'll ask, and I think you've kind of touched on this a bit, but how do you think that all of those things that you just discussed, as far as your identity, how do you think they create a unique perspective for you on the world? Obviously, they do. You said that you think it's important to reference that because you have to understand that that's going to change how the world responds to you. How does it change how you see the world, I suppose?
I mean, I think for me, one of the ways in which really it impacts the way I view the world, right, I think I'll talk about it kind of like in an like analogy kind of way. So I get really frustrated when I see like sociologists talk about oppression, right? So talk about like homophobia, talk about racism, talk about classism outside of the context of power, because right, like it's like whatever you might think about like discrimination or whatever, like just you can just there are material effects to discrimination, right? Like you see like I think like with COVID, right? Like a majority of the people who died have like disproportionately the people who have died have been like black and people of color, right? So there is this component of power that even among sociologists, and it's specifically like these older white male sociologists who will talk about these uh, social phenomena, and it's they won't take power into account, and it's just kind of like I I like it's just to me it's absurd, right? Like whatever you experience, if you don't account for power, you can't get a clear picture of what it is that's happening. And being a person of color, right? Like being queer, um, being like poor, it means that I experience a lot of like the tail end of it, right? Like if if I were to get fired for being gay, right? It's like shit, how am I going to pay my rent, right? And a lot of these scholars are just kind of like, oh, like it's not nice to discriminate against people. It's like, yeah, but these like discriminations, like you can become homeless, right? You can be killed. There are material consequences to it.
Gotcha. So the perspective is that it makes you it I think the way that you're answering the question, just to make sure that I understand, because if I don't, then I can have you clarify a bit more, is that you're acutely aware of the material consequences because of your identity.
Nicely.
Okay. Perfect. That makes a lot of sense. So to tie some of the some other stuff in, what's your experience with your identity as an LGBTQ person? You've talked a bit about this. I think you mentioned that there was a formal coming out. What was that like for you?
So like I said, right, like I've never been afraid to be controversial with my parents. I've never been like even as a little kid, I wouldn't be afraid to be like you're wrong to my parents. And so I kind of like primed my parents a lot when I was younger, because I would be like, oh, like discussions about gay marriage, and I would be like, oh, like gay marriage should be legal, and my parents would be like, no, it shouldn't. And I'd be like, yes. And so, my freshman year at college at Mass Bay, I was talking with my mom about one of the discussions we had in class, and the discussion was about gay marriage, and we got into it, and like I was like making a point, and my mom was like, "Why do you care?" And I'm like, "Because it affects me directly." And as I was saying, and I just kind of like dropped it in and then just kept talking. And my mom was like, "What?" And she was like, "What did you say?" And I'm like, "It affects me directly." And I just kept trying to like talk as if I hadn't just like declared like come out to my parents. Um, and so I don't really remember what happened, like how the conversation continued after that. I do remember after the conversation finished, calling my aunt and telling her so she could like, because my like family, like Latino families gossip, like, and I knew that if I told her, she would gossip and tell the rest of my family, and I wouldn't have to like come out to them because like I have a big ass family. My mom is 1 out of 7 kids. My dad is 1 out of 11. Like like it wasn't even like I don't want to go. Like it's just like I don't want to have to like tell like 20 different people that I'm gay. Like so
Sure.
I'll just let the family gossip will run. And so uh, that's how it happened. My my mom in the moment kind of took it better than my dad. But like long term, my dad kind of was better about it than my mom.
Gotcha. So, how did it change your relationships with them over time? How did they take it as they got time to adjust?
Um, like it really didn't change my relationship with my parents too much. I mean, partly because in general, my relationship with my parents was kind of fraught because I was like my mom and I have like very similar personalities and that we're both very like um we're both very assertive personality types, so there was always that conflict between my mother and myself, and really coming out didn't really change much about it. I kind of had to educate my parents about like being gay, um, because it was like 2006, 2007. And so they were like I think my dad at one point asked me if it was possible for me to like live my life single. And like I just like was so angry and I just refused to answer his question. Um, but like in the long run, it didn't really change much between us. Um,
Gotcha.
oh, I did come out to one of my grandmas by introducing her to my boyfriend at the time.
How did that go over?
It went fine. It was my dad, my grandma on my dad's side of the family. I did not realize she didn't know. Like I thought she knew, and so like I showed up to like one of my cousins. I think it was my cousin's kid's birthday party, and I showed up with my boyfriend at the time. And like I just went up to my grandma and I was like, "Oh, this is so and so. He's my boyfriend." And she like looks at me and she's like, "You're what?" And I'm like, "My boyfriend." And she was like, "Oh, nice to meet you." And I was like, "Oh god damn it." Like she didn't know.
Gotcha. So you suspected that she knew. You didn't think you were giving her new information.
Well, like most of like I think my dad's side of the family like actively like withheld that information from her because it wasn't like it was like it there was at that time I lived in Puerto Rico, so it had been like I'd been out for like at least 3 or 4 years. Um,
Gotcha.
So there was no reason for her to not know.
Gotcha. Fair enough. All right. So I am going to make a bit of a pivot to the next topic. Um, but let's talk a little bit about Boston Gamers. So, do you know about how long you've been part of BG and why did you join?
I think I joined sometime in May. Um, Either April or May last year. So during COVID season. I think a friend of mine mentioned it, and I looked it up and I joined, and yeah, it's not it wasn't it's not a particularly interesting, but yeah, it was just a friend told me that it existed, and I was like, I think I was actively seeking out queer community because it's just kind of hard to find queer community. And so I sought it out and I joined.
Cool. That's awesome. What about BG has had you sticking around for almost a year?
Um, I think part of it, right, it was me just kind of being like, I want queer community. And so I made the effort to stick around. And then eventually, as you know, I started running the one shots, organizing them. And so right now, that's all that's keeping me here.
Oh,
The
that's
one
it.
shots. That's it.
We stopped doing one shots. You're out the door.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
conversations never to be found again.
um, so I when I first started this interview series, I did it initially with admins and mods, and I liked to ask the question, and I continue to do this when I interview other mid bosses. Um, as BG moves forward, what do you want to change? But I have enjoyed asking this question actually to newer members as well. So I hope you'll entertain me in asking, like, um, as BG moves forward, do you think there's anything that you want to see grow or change? And if so, what is it?
Hmm. I always hate these questions because I feel like I never know what to say. Um, I think right, there's always room for improvement. Um,
Sure.
just right, that's just how things are, right? Like the day you stop growing is like the day you die. Um, and so, I mean, I think a lot of the time I see myself more as kind of somebody who stay holds back and just kind of keeps an eye on things. Um, I mean, I'm really excited for the after times, the after COVID times, to participate in the events. Um, I think that would be fun.
Sure. Fair enough. So I like to wrap up on a lighter note. So the last sort of topic that I usually do is a little bit about entertainment and hobbies. So like you just mentioned, you run the monthly D&D one-shot event for BG, which is really cool. So I thought I would start this section by asking you how long you've been playing tabletop RPGs and what got you interested in them.
Okay, so fun fact. My tabletop RPG experience, it actually started in Neopets. So if you want a some blastage from the passage. So I used to like go on Neopets, and they had like a forum dedicated to role playing, and I used to like be on there all the time when I was younger, because I've always had like a creative side. Like I've loved writing stories and stuff like that. And so I did not realize that that was kind of like my intro to role playing until like semi recently. And so I think that was like my first taste of role playing. Um, but I never played like D&D until like I was in college. And then it was like a lot of those oh like I think anybody who's played D&D knows that experience of like, oh, your friend like sets up a group and you play like 2 sessions and then you never play again. And so it was a lot of that. And I think my longest my longest experience playing D&D is the one that I currently have. Like with the I run a group, like I run a campaign with you and some other PG members, and that's like been my longest experience playing tabletop.
Gotcha. I actually think it's the longest campaign I've played in, so that's funny for me as well. So I do want to. I'm gonna jump back for a quick second, just because I didn't want to cut you off, but I think this is a good question. AMD asked what Neopet you had.
Eerie. I had an Eerie, a red Eerie, because red's my favorite color, and I was like obsessed with like Greek mythology, and it was like a cool griffin.
Fair enough. So jumping back into where we were before, but I didn't want to miss that because I thought it was good. I have no follow-up questions about that because I actually never had a Neopet, so I don't know anything about that. But do you have any favorite D&D memories that you would like to share? Does anything come to mind?
You guys like outsmart me all the goddamn time. And it's I got mad, but not like mad in that like, oh, like goddamn these players, but like in that like, goddamn it, like they outsmarted me. Like fucking uh Will remembering that you guys had the stick that would summon the high level sorceress to teleport you guys out of your encounter, like because I completely forgot about that too. So that's probably like my favorite ever. Just like, well, and especially because he was like, break the stick. And like in this session, he had just killed like a giant. So in my mind, like it was just a really bad joke he was making. Like he was like, "Oh, I broke him like a stick," and so I started laughing because I'm like, "That's such a horrible joke." I think he was like, "No, this stick to summon Capra, which is like the high level sorcerer, so she can teleport us out." And I was like, "Oh." Yeah, that'll work.
I still find that moment hilarious just because you indirectly hinted that we should do that, or I thought you had. And so when we did it, what I was thinking while you were thinking, oh shit, they outsmarted us, what I was thinking was, oh my, we failed this encounter because we could have avoided the entire thing, and we were supposed to know that. Meanwhile, what you were thinking was like they were not supposed to think of this.
It wasn't even they weren't supposed to think of this. It was like I hadn't thought of it.
Sure.
And like, frankly, to any DMs out there, like getting outsmarted by your players is both like the best and the most frustrating experience ever. Like you feel dumb and nobody likes feeling dumb, but like getting outsmarted by your players is like a rush. You're like, shit, like yeah, they're smart. They did it. I always try to reward you guys when you outsmart me.
Yeah, I appreciate that when I ask you for your favorite D&D memory, the first things that jump to mind were times that you got outsmarted. I think that like reveals a lot about you in a very positive way. Like I think it's a really funny anecdote. Um, but perfect. So pivoting away from D&D, just because I assume that it's not your only interest. Uh, considering this is a gaming server, I think I'm usually remiss if I don't get into games a little bit. So what have you been playing recently?
What have I been playing recently? I mean, I have Animal Crossing. I like to keep up with my town every now and then. Although winter is killing me because I have like a bunch of flowers everywhere as I'm trying to like breed hybrids. And so like in winter, I feel like it snows all the time as opposed and like snowing waters the flowers. So then every time it snows, like the next day I have to like go around and dig up all the flowers that sprouted, which is a pain in the ass. Um, what else? I was playing Cardo today, which is like this little game. It's on the computer, and it's like you're this little girl who has like this magic map, and like you can move the pieces of the map around, and it like moves the world around correspondingly. And it's kind of like a little puzzle adventure game.
Gotcha. I've heard of that. I've heard quite good things. So
I've been on like an indie kick. I think yeah, I've been on an indie kick. I feel like I don't appreciate what better graphics have done to gaming. Like the the disappearance of overworlds in JRPGs is like the saddest thing to me.
gotcha.
Especially because it's always like replaced with like these like small impenetrable islands with bushes on them and stuff like that. And I'm just like, I hate this.
Gotcha. Interesting. Um, so what are some of the all-time greats in your video game library, and what makes a video game great?
All time greats. I haven't played it in a really, really long time. But like Harvest Moon 64, I don't know if it's like I haven't played it anytime recently, but that game holds a soft spot, like a spot in my heart. Pokemon Ruby and like Ruby Gen 3. Gen 3 is like the best gen. Had some of the best Pokemon. Blaziken is like my all-time fave. Flygon is also like a sick ass Pokemon. Um, you got abilities, right? And natures. So third gen Pokemon was amazing. Um, I've been playing Dragon Quest Builders. I have Dragon Quest Builders 1 and 2. The mechanics of 1 are better in that like you can like the way the game is laid out is I like it better, but like Dragon Quest Builders 2 has like a lot of like amazing quality of life updates. So it's like a little bit of a give and take. What makes a game good? Like make it interesting, right? Like I feel like one of the things, like as I said, like I feel like this improvement of graphics has led to like Final Fantasy, what was it, 13, which was like what was like people called it like a hallway simulator because it was like the graphics were amazing, but like you were walking down a straight hall for like 90% of the game. And I think there's like this like games are to be played, right? And it's like it's great if it looks good, but like make it fun to play. Give me something interesting to do.
Gotcha.
Oh,
Fair enough.
Tales of Symphonia. Tales of Symphonia. All time. I can't believe I forgot it because like that's straight up my favorite video game of all time.
Fair enough. I've heard quite good things about it. So good. All right. I think with that, we will go ahead and wrap up today, if that's all right by you. So I have my litany of thank yous that I always offer. First and foremost, thank you, Johnny, for sitting here and answering questions for an hour. It was a pleasure, and I appreciate you being willing to discuss all this stuff. The chat was like excited. They were like, came for an interview, got a small sociology lesson. There was a lot of excitement about everything that you said, but even I think the most excitement about the sociology lesson, which I thought would bring you a lot of joy if you didn't happen to have the chance to see any of the chat yet.
Look, I've been toying with the idea of like starting a Twitch stream where I just play like random video games and talk about sociology.
Fair enough. So then my second thank you goes out to Zach/Hednisk, who runs tech for me for this every time. And it makes it infinitely easier than it would be if I had to try to manage it myself at the same time that I was doing the interview stuff. Big shout out to Oni every time, who edits the script for these things every single time, even when I send them the script like 30 seconds before I need it. They always make time for me and always make great edits. So I appreciate it infinitely. And just a big shout out in general to the mods and planners of BG who let me do this run with like a crazy talk show idea and encouraged me to do it instead of telling me to shut up because it was ridiculous. And it was ridiculous, but but it happened. And then last but certainly not least, I want to just offer a big thank you to the chat and the viewers for coming out. This is fun because you're here chatting, talking, interacting. Would not be fun without that. So I deeply appreciate it. Thank you all. And before I sign off, do you have any last words for our audience, Johnny?
I don't know what's something controversial that I could say. Like professing love for Comic Sans. Im- Everybody, just imagine I said something really controversial and that you didn't like.
Perfect. Sounds wonderful to me. Have a good night, everyone. Drive safe. Take care.